My name is Saqib, and I am the product lead at GMATWiz, and I'm also the principal architect of the GMATWiz portal. So all the intelligence, all the system that you see at GMATWiz and our platform, I've been primarily involved in creating all the logic and the content also to a certain extent. I have been in this industry for a long time now. It's now close to 10 years, and I like teaching quant a lot. I've even taken the GMAT and the Indian version of GMAT, which is CAT. And as I told you, I like teaching quant a lot. I like to simplify stuff as much as possible. And in this session also, I'll try my best to make sure to help you understand how to approach data sufficiency questions and at the same time, what kind of mistakes you make and how you can avoid them. Okay, with this, let's get started. As far as the progression of the webinar is concerned, it's pretty simple. I'll jump right into the webinar. I'll start talking about data sufficiency, and that would continue. The discussion would continue for about 80 to 90 minutes, depending on how we pace the session. And I would be keeping about 5 to 10 minutes at the end. If you have any questions related to, say, GMAT prep or quant prep, or if you want to know how GMATWiz can help you prepare for GMAT, any question, please feel free to ask them, in the Q&A session at the end. Okay. With this, let's get started, and let me ask you a simple question. What do you think is the major reason because of which students falter in a data sufficiency question? And I want you to pitch in your experience. So those of you who have started your prep, I'm sure you must have come across data sufficiency questions. What do you think is the primary reason because of which you make a mistake in a data sufficiency question? Or what do you find particularly difficult in a data sufficiency question? And I would want to request you to everyone to answer, try to make it an interactive session. That would be great if you can pitch in your thoughts. Okay, Kapil says choose. Kapil, yes, I think that choosing the right option would be a problem for both PS and DS, in my opinion. Chandan says time. Okay, anything else apart from choosing the right option and time? So if I understand correctly, Chandan says because of time, I falter, and because of the lack of time, I'm assuming you falter in the data sufficiency question. And Kapil, from your point, when you say choosing the right option, I think I assume that you mean, not being able to choose between C and E, A and B, those kind of things. Okay, Sachin says logical understanding. Manisha's statement looks sufficient, but ends up with wrong judgment. Choosing E and C, some same options available. Correct technique to analyze. Okay, not paying attention to Divya. That's a good point. Arya also, that's a good point. Neha, actually, that's also a good point. Not solving completely and taking a guess. I would say that one of the major reasons. Again, I'm going to discuss all of the reasons, but one of the reasons which I think people falter is, and the major one is because they don't, they analyze the question properly. In data sufficiency question, there's a huge tendency of just reading the questions, looking at the statements, and then trying to guess here whether that statement may or may not be sufficient by just looking at it, not even solving a lot, and then taking a guess. I think that's one of the major problems. But what I've done is I've tried to segregate the mistakes in a more methodical way so that you have a clear picture of what you may be doing wrong. And those of you who haven't even started, at least you can be careful about these mistakes and make sure that you don't, do them when you start solving the questions. So let's start off with the first one, and I say I would put this as again a top reason for not doing well in data sufficiency question. By the way, this lack of conceptual clarity, this reason is a universal reason. It could be a problem for both data sufficiency questions as well as problem solving questions. So just to clarify it, just because I'm saying lack of conceptual clarity here, that doesn't mean you don't need it in PS. You need it in PS also. Now, what do I mean by lack of conceptual clarity? And it's pretty simple to understand, right? I don't know the concept, so I'm not able to solve it. And I've given the example here. We don't need to solve it. Though you're free to, though I would recommend that you read it. I'll give you 15, 20 seconds to read it. So if you look at the question, The question just talks about x, which is an integer, a positive integer which is greater than 1, and we are being asked the value of x. Okay, and then two statements are given. One talks about common factors, and one talks about just factors. Now, what usually happens is that if students don't know the difference between common factor, these things play an important role. What do I just mean by factor? What do I mean by just, common factor? What do I mean by, least common factor? What's the difference between all of these? Now, if you do not have a conceptual clarity, which I'm writing as CC, if you don't have a conceptual clarity of these things or the differences between this, then there is a good chance that you would end up making a mistake or choosing the wrong answer in this question. Okay, and there's just one example. Whatever topic you do, if you don't know that concept, we are doomed, right? So as simple as that. The most important reason is, so to fix this, by the way, to just make sure that you do well in data sufficiency question, the first and the most important prerequisite is that you make sure that whatever topic that you have been going through, make sure that you have 100% concept and clarity on it before solving the questions, either PS or TS. Okay. Now, let's look at a more important reason, and this is something which a lot of you have pointed out in different languages, by the way, not paying attention or not solving properly, but this falls under the category of lack of thorough analysis. And this happens a lot in DS, because I told you of the reason, because you have this tendency of just guessing the answer or just looking at the question and then trying to kind of just guess what would work. And this is a very good example, by the way. Why I'm saying that this is a good example, because and what do we exactly mean by lack of thorough analysis also? So the process that we teach, okay, at GMAT Wiz is that whenever you see a question, you analyze this first. Analyze and figure out what exactly do you want, okay? And then we move on to look at the individual statement. We look at this first individually, by the way. Then we look at this individually. If both of them individually are not sufficient, then we tell you to combine, which is the usual process. So people mostly, what the major reason because of which people get the question wrong is because students don't do this part properly. Okay, which we call analysis or pre-analysis, whatever you want to call. Pre-analysis before going to the statement. This is something which I'm telling you with 100% confidence that people don't do this properly. I've seen people making mistakes in crash courses, in the session that I'm taking now, in tutoring sessions. Students directly jump into the statement and try to figure out the answer, which is, like, I would say, the second most important reason because of making a mistake, that you don't know what you're looking for, especially in 650 plus level questions. If you just read the question stem, don't do analysis, move on to the statements, there is a high chance that you would end up making a mistake. I can guarantee you that you would not know exactly what to find out. So either you'll waste time or end up making a mistake. Either of these two things will definitely happen. Okay. Now, what I mean by analysis is, and I've taken this simple example because it's easy to do an analysis. Can anyone tell me, after reading this, what can I infer? What am I exactly looking for? Can anyone tell me? After reading this, what can I infer? What exactly should I look for when I go to the statements? And you can put in your response in the chat box. Anyone? Okay, Sachin says X and Y are greater than 0. Okay, that's one of the inferences that I can make. Raghavendra says at least one of X and Y should be even. Good. Product is even, so one of them should be even. Good. X and Y multiple of 2 is one of the two even. Okay, good. Absolutely good. So guys, that's what I'm talking about, that whenever you go to the state, before moving to the statement, what you should ideally do is read this as I think Sachin mentioned X and Y greater than 0. So you should write that down, saying that X and Y, they are greater than 0. You should write that down. Okay. But what you need to find out, the question is X into Y even? So this is a yes, no question. So you could get even, you could get odd also, okay? Now, when would you say yes? You would say yes when at least one of them is even. one of them is even, right? And you would say no, because this is a yes no question. You could say no if both are odd. Okay, so this is the way you should analyze it. And the reason I'm saying think about both yes and no, because sometimes in a statement could be sufficient because the answer that you're getting is no. Now, if you're fixated with the word odd, then also there's a good chance that you will keep on looking for odd only. The question is not asking is not asking you to prove x into y is odd. The question is just asking you, hey, tell me, is it even or not? That's all. So the answer could be yes, the answer could be no. Okay, so and let's even say that you were able to figure out that at least one of them should be even if people don't do this analysis, what will happen is they look at two variables, they say, okay, x and y, I need to figure out whether they're even. They just read it, they don't do the pre-analysis. Then what they will do is when they're looking at the statement is they'll try to find out the nature of x and y individually. They would say, I would need a unique nature of x and y. If I don't get a unique nature, I will not be able to find out the answer. And that is a trap that they would fall into, and they might end up marking the answer as either C or E, something like this, because they weren't aware that you don't need an exact value of x and y. If you can figure out if at least one of them is even, that's enough to answer the question. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, that you should be very clear about what you need to find out. And that is why you should always do pre-analysis. If you don't do it, you would end up making a mistake. Now, here, inferences, simplification, these kind of skills play a big role. And this is something that I've been talking about in a lot of webinars, that the ability to be able to, to simplify an equation, the ability to deduce that you're looking for at least one, trying to figure out if at least one of them is even or not. These things need to be sharpened and honed because they're not direct application. You have to deduce or infer what exactly you need to find out. Okay, and that would require a little bit of a lot of practice, a lot of self-analysis to see what exactly are you not doing well at. Okay, let's talk about the third reason, and it's a pretty simple reason. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but as I told you, one of the reason is that you look at the question, okay, and you don't want to solve it. You're not even interested in solving the question. You simply say, you look at this question and you see that you need to find out the value of x. You see two variables. You look at this equation, you see two variables, you'll say this is not sufficient. You look at this statement, you see this is not sufficient. What is wrong with this? Can anyone tell me? And even if you combine, you might end up marking the answer E. Is there anything wrong with this? Can anyone tell me if anything is wrong with this process? Okay, Chandan says both are same on the left side. Okay. What about the others? What do they think? And you don't have to solve it. I'm just interested in knowing why is this approach incorrect. A by B is same in both, same equation. Okay, so you're giving me the answer. That's fine. But let me talk about the process, why I am calling this incorrect. Why is the approach of solving questions like this is incorrect? It's incorrect because the moment you analyze a statement like this, you end up saying that, okay, both these statements are individually not sufficient. And the problem is that you don't solve. The method is incorrect because you're not solving to verify whether both the equations that you have, both of them are distinct or not. That is something that you're not checking. So you're being lazy out here. You're just looking at two variables, two equations, and you are thinking that you may end up getting the answer. So a lot of people, I would say, end up marking C. The right process is that, okay, you say that individually they are not sufficient. That's fine. But before marking the answer as C, what you should do is you should verify whether you have to, both of them are same or distinct equation or not. Because see, they look distinct. But if I take the first equation, okay, and let's say I divide all of this by 4. And why I'm doing this is because I want to get a 5 here. I want to make the coefficient of this also same. If I multiply this by 5, you'll notice I'll end up getting the same equation, 5x plus 3.75y equal to 15. So the first equation is in fact the same as the second equation, just disguised in a different way, that's all. Okay, now those of you who do not check this, that we have two distinct equations, will end up falling for a trap, and that's simply because you don't want to solve the question. You are simply being lazy. And these kind of problems, GMAT does know that. GMAT knows that students would try to save time, they would be lazy, they would look at the question stem, think about variables, how many variables do they need to solve the question, and end up marking the answer. So you need, so the simple solution obviously is not to be lazy. You should not skim information and jump to conclusion. That's a bad thing. Before marking the answer, whatever inference that you're making, just double check whether it works or not. If it works, then only mark your answer, otherwise don't. Okay. Last is a most common problem, which I want to talk about, which is all of you have somewhere or the other at the back of your mind this tension that I need to save time. Now, I'm not saying don't save time. It's a timed exam, right? So obviously, you would want to save time, but to save time, solving questions in a hurry is not the solution. Okay, to save time, if you want to save time, then you have to get better at solving questions, making inferences quickly, knowing which information to apply, and using the right way of writing down information and solving the question. Okay, if you follow this, like you read properly, you jot the information down properly, and you know how to solve the question, that automatically saves time. Okay, a lot of time in the exam gets wasted because you have made a careless mistake. In fact, I would say the first reason, not careless mistake. The first reason would be not knowing what to do. So what you do is you spend a lot of time thinking. You're thinking, okay, how should I approach the question? What should I do? Should I take a variable? Not should I not take a variable? And this is also because of the lack of conceptual clarity. The first thing that I talked about. This increases your time of solving the question. Okay, since you want to save time, you would be rushing through, and once you do that, you end up making a lot of careless calculation mistakes. It could be a calculation mistake. Okay, it could be, you know, setting up the wrong information, like which we call as translation. What do I mean by translation? You read a question stem, like you'll notice this is the wordy question, right? A lot of text given out here. Now, if you're in a hurry, you might read this very quickly, and you might end up either writing the wrong equation or the wrong data while solving the question, which might either lead to calculation mistake, or, you know, if since the equation is wrong, automatically you get the wrong answer. So I hope you get the point that saving time should not be done by rushing through or worrying about time. If you want to save time, you have to get good at the first two things which I talked about. That is having a good conceptual clarity, and the second thing is making sure that you have sharpened your skills in such a way that you're able to do a thorough analysis and you know how to approach questions. Obviously, exposure to a lot of different questions can also help you. Okay, that's also important. So you should also make sure, along with building a good conceptual clarity, you get exposure to a lot of difficult questions also. Okay, so don't try and save time just because you see a big question. If you are able to, you know, break down the question stem properly, which I'm going to show you in a few questions when we discuss it, you will notice that if the information is jotted down properly once, then you can save a lot of time and you would be able to get the correct answer also. And I'm going to show you an example for this, don't worry. Okay, but is this part clear, guys, what I'm talking about? Do you agree with it or not? What do you think about it? I've been doing a monologue for a long time, so let me know your thoughts. Would you agree with the 4 points that I've talked about? Lack of conceptual clarity, you know, being lazy, not doing the proper analysis, and trying to save time. So these are the 4 things that I would recommend that you keep in mind, especially the first 2, and the last one. Lazy, obviously, is something that you have to, you know, stop doing it, making sure that you do everything properly. Now, as far as learning is concerned, and the screenshots that I've used is of GMATWiz. You can use anything that you want. That's not a problem. But what I would say the right way to learn any topic, be it for PS questions, DS questions, is make sure that the number one thing that I talked about is go through the lessons properly. Okay. Now, if you're a GMATWiz student, make sure that you start off with your video lessons. This basically touches upon all the basic concepts that you definitely need to master before you can start solving questions. So whatever resources that you are using, make sure that you have your basics in place. If the basics is not placed, you cannot do anything. Okay. The second thing is something which we call, let me just go back a bit, which we call a concept booster. Okay. Now the name doesn't matter much, but the purpose of this file or the way you need to prepare is make sure that after you learn the concepts, you know how to apply them. A lot of students come to me and tell me that I know the formula percentage increase, it's simple, but whenever I have to apply it, I don't know what to do, how to set up my equation, or what is the right way of writing it. A similar problem I've seen with people coming up and saying me in permutation combination in geometry that I know the formula triangle, but I wasn't sure how to take variables or which perpendicular to take, those kind of things. Now, what the booster does is, and if you're using some other resource, what I would say is, while solving questions, focus on the way it is being solved, the question, way of solving. Okay, focus on the way of solving. So what booster files does is, as far as GMAT students are concerned, is that these are all video solutions. Okay, so we clearly show you how you should set up your equations, how you should solve them, what is the approach, step by step to reach the correct answer. So after just learning the concept is not enough. That is the point that I'm trying to put across. If you want to do well, you have to learn how to solve question methodically, how to make various cases. A lot of people make mistakes because they don't know how to create cases. This is, like, I would say, a big problem in data sufficiency question. You miss one case and that might change your answer from E to C. Okay, and those kind of problems you need to get rid of, and you can be able to do it if you follow the solutions properly, if you know how to solve methodically. Okay, so that's the approach you should keep for each and every concept. I hope this part is clear. So summarizing this part before we move on to solving questions is focus on concept. That is something which all of you know. But the second part, which is missing in most of the students' preparation, is learning how to solve the right way to solve questions. So make sure that you learn how to apply those concepts. And the last thing which I want to say is that do not worry much about time. If these two are in place, believe me, you won't have to worry about this. Like, we as experts, we never worry about this factor a lot. We don't. I'm not saying that if you don't manage time, we definitely do. But let's say if you're taking a mock, or if you're taking anything, a test also, since our first two things are in place, or I'm not talking about only experts, I'm talking about students who do well also, those people who end up getting within the range of 48 to 50. These people, for them, these two are definitely in place. They know most of the stuff properly. And while solving a question, they have a very good idea for about I would say 60 to 70% of the questions on how to approach them. And that automatically takes care of this part. Okay, so your primary focus should be on these two, not this one. Okay. Now, what we are going to do is I'm going to, whatever I've talked about, it's important that you actually see them in action also, so that you believe, okay, whatever Saqib is saying, it makes sense. Or it's not just only about, he's just not blabbering, just for the sake of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss with you about 6 to 8 questions, depending on how much time permits. And through these questions, I'm going to help you understand, or I will try to prove that whatever I've told you so far is really, really important for you to do well. If you're making a mistake because of if you're making a mistake, you're making a mistake because you're not following any of the things that I've talked about. Okay. So the process would be simple. What I'm going to do is post now, I'm going to show you a question, okay, like this. Once I show the question, I'll give you about 2.5 to 3 minutes to solve that particular question, and I would open up a poll also. Okay, so those of you who after you're done solving the question, please mark your answer in the poll. Okay, it's a request that do not put your answers in the chat box. I'm saying it very clearly, do not. I'll delete it. All the answers that you need to put have to be put in the poll. If for some reason you were not able to do it on a mark on the poll, then send me a private chat on if you want to tell me your answer. But if you're sending it on chat, send it a private chat. Okay. Once the poll is done, I would show you the result. I'll show you where most people have faltered and what was the reason behind it, so that you clearly understand how you need to avoid those kind of mistakes. Okay. So I hope this is perfectly clear, guys. I am bringing up the first question on screen, and you can get started, and I'll bring up the poll. So I did the poll also, and I'll give you about 2.5 minutes to do this. into the habit of doing it. So whenever you attend webinars like these, if a question is given and if the time's up, then mark something. Try to take an educated guess and put in the response. Okay, I'm ending the poll now, guys. It's a very interesting result. Let me show it to you. In the meantime, those of you who are done with the, who have put in your responses, can you tell me what's your take on this question? What do you think? Is it a difficult question, easy question? Here are the responses, guys, by the way. And you can see it's all over the place. Though a lot of you chose C and D as the answer, 36% and 21%. Unfortunately, C and D, neither of those two are correct. I'll tell you which one is the correct answer when we solve it. But what's your take on this question? Okay, Manshu says it's lengthy but not difficult. Okay, difficult, lengthy. Tausif says difficult. Okay. What I would say is, I would kind of agree with Himanshu on this a bit, and I would say this question is a bit lengthy. When I say lengthy, I mean there's a lot of text, but it's not that difficult. Once you know, again, I know I'm adding a condition here, but if you're able to infer properly, okay, and as usual make cases, then it should not be a problem. Second thing, I would say the most important thing before this is how you read the question, and this is something which I want to focus on because I've seen people not reading properly. Okay, so how would I do this question? I'm going to show you that. Okay, and this is exactly how I would follow it. So if I see this question, here's I'm going to how I'll solve it. I'll start reading from the starting. In a certain team, the workforce planning sheet for each day is given by a 8-digit unique document number. So the moment I read till this part, I'll think very briefly that can I add something on my piece of paper? Can I write something? So at the max, what I'll do is maybe just maybe I'll create 4 blanks like this. Okay, I'll say, okay, 8-digit unique document number. Let me just make 8 spaces. That's all I would do after reading this. The first 6 digits of the document number is the date of the preparation of the planning sheet in the DDMMYY format. Okay, so what I would do is maybe just maybe I would say, okay, DDMMYY. Okay, let's read further. For example, a document prepared on 03 Feb 2010 will have the first 6 digits 030210. And this is pretty self-explanatory. This is something that we have been doing it in our real life also, so it should not be a problem. And I don't need to write anything here. I've understood what I need to do. Okay. The 7th digit, now they're talking about this digit, the 7th digit of the document is the units digit. So I'll write somewhere, okay, 7th digit is the units digit of what? It's a unit digit of 9 times the sum of the first and the third digit. Okay, so they're saying 9 times sum of the first plus, right, plus third digit. I'll put it here. Okay, and the 8th digit, so I'll again write, okay, 8th digit of the document is the units digit of 11 times, okay, 11 times the sum of the second and the fourth digit. Okay, separate till here. Okay, if a document number is in the form of, okay, now they're telling me the form, which is good for me. They're telling me it is A, B, C, D, 1, 3, 8, 1, where A, B, C, D are non-negative single-digit number. Now, the moment I read this, I would write somewhere on my paper that A, B, C, D, they can be 0, 1, 2, 3, blah, 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 blah. I'll write it and make sure that I have this information that some of them could be 0 also. In which month and on what date of that month was the document prepared? So basically, I'm looking for the ABCD, as simple as that. So I need to find out what is A, B, and C. Now, can you tell me, did you read it exactly the way I did it? Or did you read it in one go and then wrote the information, or read it in one go, then reread it to write the information? How did you read it? This might sound trivial, but it plays a very important role in solving the question within the time limit. So can you tell me what did you do? Okay, so Chandan, when you say one go, do you mean you read it in one go and then wrote it again, or one go the way I did it? Okay, Iris is the way you read, noted down the info while reading. Okay, good. So if you're noting down the information while reading, that's a good thing. If you are not forming the equation, and if you're not breaking the sentences the way I've broken it, then please make sure that you do it. For those of you who did not, those of you who have done it, well and good, kudos to you. Did it exactly? You should be doing it exactly in this way. Okay, so let's see what else can we do out here. Now what I can do is I can replace this with A, with C. I can replace this with B. I can replace this with D. Okay, I know my 7th digit is 8, so I'll put 8 here. This is my 8th digit. I know this is 1. I'll put 1 here. Now, there's one more thing which I would do. As I told you, that I would not stop here. I would not go to the statement directly. I'll try and see if I can do some pre-analysis, and if I can figure out anything about A, B, C, D before going forward. Now tell me, I'm multiplying 9 with something. Okay, 9 with a number, and I'm getting the unit digit as 8. So think of it in this way: 9 times something. Okay, let me write it as 9 times, say, x for a moment, is giving the unit digit as 8. The unit digit is 8. So can you tell me what is the units digit of x? What could be x? Anyone? What could be x? I need a unit digit as 8. So 9 times what gives me an 8 at the end? Think of the table of 9. 2, right? 9 times 2 gives me 18. So there's a good chance, so I should be able to infer that A plus C could be 2. Now, the moment I write this, what will happen is I should start thinking, okay, what could be A, by the way? It's a date. Now, date can be 0, 1, 2, right? So I can have dates like 0, 9, 1, 5, 2, 1. By the way, it could also be 3, 3, 0. So A could be 0, 1, 2, 3. And C could be 0, 1, only, nothing else, right? So a month could be maximum 12. So I know C could be 0, 1. Now, so if I have A plus C is equal to 2, then I can say this is possible if I have 1 plus 1, okay? Or if I have 2 plus 0. So I can get the value of A and C would fall something within whatever I have written. Is this part clear? I'm bringing up a yes or no poll quickly. Let me know if this part is clear. Okay, good. Now, let's come to this part. Okay, those of you are saying, I can see 1 or 2 no's. If those of you who did not understand, please ask. Okay. Now, as far as Chandan, I cannot have a month as, I cannot have a 0 here and a 2 here. The month ends, the month could be maximum 1, 2. Okay, so C can be maximum 1, it cannot be 2. So when you say 0, 2, I'm talking about A and C. I'm not talking about A. B can definitely be 2. B could be 2, but I'm talking about A and C. C cannot be 2. Okay, I hope that answers your query. Now, as far as B and D are concerned, now see, B could be anything, right? 0 to 9. So I could have a date like 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3 till 0, 9 and whatever. It can keep on going. Same goes for D also. D can also take a value of 0, 1 to 0 to 9. So I'll write this. Now, tell me 11 times something is giving me 1. Okay, so what would be the unit digit of X? What am I multiplying with to get a unit digit as 1? Anyone? 1, right? The unit digit is 1. So B plus D can take a lot of cases. So B plus D could be 1, right? That's one possibility. Or B plus D could be 11 also. So the moment I see that there are multiple possibilities, I can try and write down certain cases. Okay, or I can pause and say, okay, B plus D 11 could come in a lot of ways. So 9, 2, 7, 4, a lot of cases. So I know in what scenarios they can come. So let me just write it here and then go to the statement and see if I can eliminate it. But this is the amount of pre-analysis that I would do. Now, frankly speaking, if I'm doing this in an exam time, I would definitely end up taking 1.5 minutes here only. Okay, there's a good chance that I might even end up taking 2 minutes. To be very frank, but I am okay with it because it's a 7 level plus question. Okay, now in this question, sometimes we may end up taking, it's totally okay to even end up taking 2.5 minutes. But if I'm able to do this analysis properly in 1.5 to 2 minutes, the amount of time that I will be spending in each of the statement would be very less. And let me show you how. So if I go to the first statement says, the first two digits of the document are 2 and 0. So notice they are telling me this is 2, this is 0. Now I know the sum of A plus C has to be 2. If A is 2, then C has to be 0, right? Then only I'll get 2. And if B is 0 and B plus D has to be 1, so obviously the value of D has to be 1. There's no other option. So using statement 1, I can tell that the date has to be 20011381. Done. 15 seconds at the max it will take for me to answer using statement 1. Anyone, any doubts here, or is this clear? Please mark yes if this is clear. Okay, great. Now, let's go to the second statement. So my answer would either be A or D. I can remove all the rest of the options. Vartika, this is something which we arrived in the pre-analysis only. Remember, I told you that 9 times something is, and I'm getting 8. So 9 times 2 only would give me the unit digit as 8. Okay. I hope that answers your query, Vartika. Now, coming to the second statement, the sum of the first and the third digit is a multiple of 2. Sum of A plus C is a multiple of 2. Now, this is something which you already know. We did our analysis, so we already know. Those of you who hasn't done the pre-analysis would end up wasting time here, but we won't. You would simply say, okay, this we already know. Let's see what else we know. Its second digit is 0. Okay, this is 0. Now, if this is 0, I can say that this has to be 1. That's for sure. Okay, but what about A and C? I'm just being told that it is a multiple of 2. So either it could be 2, 0, okay, or it could be 1, 1. So there are two possibilities that come from here when I just know it's a multiple of 2. And since I'm getting two different answers out here, I would say this is not sufficient. Statement 2 is not sufficient. So the correct answer in this case is going to be option A. Please let me know if this is clear. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So while you're asking questions, while you're marking in the poll whether it's clear or not, the takeaway from this question, guys, is number 1, to whenever you see a word problem, read it by breaking it down properly the way I've done. Okay, if you're doing it already, very good. Second thing is, before jumping to the statement, you should pause for a second and thought, can I do any pre-analysis or not? If the answer is yes, there is a scope of doing some analysis, do it. Okay, you may feel that you're wasting your time, but that's not the case. You're always saving time if you're doing some pre-analysis, if you know what exactly you should be looking for. Okay, and post that, you should then go into the analysis part of the individual statement. Okay. Okay, Chandan, please repeat the second option. Chandan, see, I've already told you that. Okay, Picha, you're saying please slow down. So, Picha, if at any point of time, if you're not understanding anything, or if I'm going too fast, please let me know. But by the way, I'm pausing at each point, so and asking again if there's any doubts. So if there's anything which is not clear, you can let me know. I'll be more than happy to explain. Okay, I'm repeating the second statement once more. The sum of the first and the third digit is a multiple of 2. Okay. Now, what did I get from my pre-analysis? This was a part of the pre-analysis. Remember, guys, this is something which we got in a pre-analysis. What did we get? We had already figured out that A plus C would be 2. So if I'm told that the sum of the first and the third digit of the document is a multiple of 2, that means A plus C is 2. Okay, multiple of 2 could be anything. It could be 2, 4, 6, 8, blah, 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 blah. But obviously 4, 6, 8 is not possible because we need the unit digit as 8. So A plus C has to be 2. That is, we had already inferred in statement 1. Now, if A plus C is 2, there are only two possibilities. Either A plus C would be, A would be 1, C would be 1. That is case number 1. And the second case would be 2, 0, 1, 3, 8, 1. Is this part clear or not? So Sahil, Aradhana, Chandan, Picha, is this part clear? Aradhana, I'll come to your query how to cover this within 2 minutes. But I hope this part is clear. Okay. Now, since I am getting two different cases, that the moment you get two different cases, you can say that this statement is not sufficient. Okay. Because even if you use this part, its second digit is 0. If I put B as 0, okay, I've already inferred that if B is 0, then D has to be 1. That was again done in a pre-analysis. So if this is 0, then D has to be 1. But since we are getting two different dates, that is why we ended up saying statement 2 is not sufficient. Okay. Now, Aradhana, I have already said this, that if this is a, if it is a 700 plus level question, then in those cases, you're not expected to solve all 700 plus level questions in 2 minutes. Okay. Usually when you're taking a mock exam or you're taking the actual exam, there would be questions which are easy questions, right? So or medium questions. Those questions we expect you to solve quickly, like in 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. So the time that you save in those questions, they are kind of utilized in these difficult questions. So nobody is telling you, even I'm not saying that do this in 2 minutes. I'm not saying that. In fact, I very honestly mentioned here that I might end up doing my pre-analysis and it may take me 1.5, 2 minutes. It will definitely take me that much amount of time. But post that, when I'm analyzing my statement, it would take me 0.5 to 1 minute, not more than that. Now, even if I spend 3 minutes on this question and get it correct, it is worth it. Okay, so that's the point that I'm trying to put across. So don't worry, as I told you, don't worry, don't get too fixated on doing all questions in 2 minutes. That's a wrong approach. Okay. I hope this is clear. No, I hope there are no more doubts. Arya, unfortunately, we don't provide the PDF, but we do provide the recording. Okay, so I'll share the YouTube link. You can, if you want to see these questions again, you can go through the recording ones. Okay, so let's go to the next question, guys. I don't see any more questions. So here's the next one. And let me bring up the poll. Once again, you have about 2.5 minutes to do this. Arya, I've shared the YouTube link. I would recommend subscribing to it so that whenever we upload the this is an interesting question in which the trap that was set was is a D trap basically, and in fact about 10-15 seconds ago the number of people who had marked D was actually huge. It reduced at the end, but yeah, those of you who are solving it properly, there's a good chance if you're making a mistake, then you may end up marking D as the incorrect answer. However, in this case also, I can see that some of you have ended up marking. By the way, C is the second highest chosen option in general also, because you might be looking for the exact value of chairs, tables, and wardrobe. If you're doing that, then you may end up marking C as your answer. So these two are the most popular ones. Usually people don't mark E or B. If you fall under that category, then there's a good chance that you are, not comfortable with the concept of ratio at this point of time, and you may need to brush up your concept. But that's my take on the question so far. What about you guys? What do you think of this question? Definitely smaller than the previous one, shorter than the previous one. But apart from that, did you find this more conceptually difficult, or was this okay, easy to solve? Still tricky. Okay. Okay, so let me just jot down a few things that I'm testing out here. One is related to ratios. When are they sufficient? or enough to answer the question, that is something that we are going to look at. Okay. When is, absolute values, or, a mix of absolute values plus variables not sufficient to answer the question? Okay. These are some of the things that we are going to cover in this question. And again, this is a very typically tested, most frequently tested kind of a error that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so let's start reading the question. And I would, again, as I told you, I'll show you the way I would do it. On a certain day, a furniture store sold only chairs, tables, and wardrobes, which is fine. Okay, there are three things. At the max, if I had to write it, I would write CTW. I don't know anything else. Of all the furniture that were sold on that day, 1/8 were tables. Okay, so of all the furnitures that were sold, so okay, whatever total furnitures that was sold, or of that, 1/8 were tables, 1/4 chairs, and 5/8 wardrobe of the total. Okay, and I'll write this much and then I'll move again because I don't see anything else that I can do at this point of time. The revenue from which of these three, chairs, wardrobes, and tables, was the greatest? So I'm looking whose revenue is the greatest. Okay. Now, whenever I see a question where they are talking about number of units and revenues, and this is the type of question that you will come across a lot, what I prefer to do is very quickly make a unit, price, and revenue table. Okay. It's like a better way of consolidating all information in one place. So I'll write this as number of units. Okay. Number of units, price, uh, per unit, okay, and the revenue that they are generating. Okay, so now the number of units, I have been told the number of units in terms of the total. So out of the total, 1/8, 1/4, and 5/8 were tables. So what I'll do is, since I don't know the total number of tables, what I can do is I can assume them as n, x, whatever you want to. The other thing which I can do is, because I don't want to deal with, fractions, I would take something which is a multiple of the denominator. So since all three of them have, are divisible by 8, I might assume, okay, let's assume that the total units that was sold is 8x. Okay, why am I doing this? Because if I write it like this, then I know 1/8 were tables. So 1/8 of 8x would end up giving me x. Okay, and I'm writing it directly here. This would end up giving me x. 1/4 of 8x would end up giving me 2x, and 5/8 of 8x would end up giving me 5x. I'll pause here for a moment. Please let me know if this part is clear or not. Then only would I move on to the next part. Let me bring up the poll. Is this part clear? Keep in mind, there's no harm in taking n also or simply x also. It's just that I don't want to deal with a fraction, is why I'm taking a multiple of 8, nothing else. Okay, I can see all of you are saying it's clear. So, okay, let's move on to the next part. Now, I've also been, I haven't been told anything about the price per unit. So this is still a big question mark for me. I have no clue about it. And I need to find out the revenue. So before going to the statement, all I would say is that, okay, let me see if I can figure out the price per unit. If I can find the price per unit, then there's a chance that I might find out revenue. That's the only inference that I would draw and move directly to the statements. Okay, so let's look at the first statement. The first statement says that the selling price of one chair, okay, good. Now they're talking about the selling price per unit of one chair, one table, and one wardrobe is basically 6:5:3. Okay, now this makes my life easy because that is what was missing in this column. So if you have gone through the concept of ratio, you must be knowing that whenever a ratio like this is given, 6:5:3, then we can write that, we can assume that the price per unit for the chair, the table, and the wardrobe can be written as 6 times something. So I've already used x, so I'm taking a y here. So I can write it as 6y, 5y, 3y. Okay, so this is the way I can write it once I know the ratio of all the three. So let me put it here. Chair is 6y, table is 5y, and wardrobe is 3y. Okay. Now I need the revenue. So I'll simply multiply the unit. That's what we need to do. Number of units multiplied by the price per unit. So this would give me 12xy. This would give me 5xy. And on multiplying this, I would get 15xy. I'll pause here. Please let me know if anything is not clear. Please feel free to ask questions at this point of time before I, draw my inferences. Arya, we don't know y is exactly 1 or not, so we cannot assume it. So whenever we are given a ratio, we have to take it as 6 times something, and that something could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 3. Okay, so you don't know whether you're exactly selling it for $6, $5, or $3 or not. It could be $12, $10, and $6 also, right? Even the ratio of this is 6:5:3. Okay, so if you're assuming y to be 1, that's a mistake. Just to let you know, should not do that. Okay, any other questions, anyone? Okay, I can see it's clear to everyone. So now see, if you look at the revenue of all three of them, all of them have the common element xy. So now all I need to do is check which has a greater coefficient. Some of you, if you have done this, may end up saying that this is not sufficient because you don't know xy, but that doesn't matter. No, all of them have xy in it. So it's like 12 times xy, 5 times xy, and 15 times xy. Okay, so all of them have xy. I look at the coefficient. The coefficient of wardrobe is the maximum, so I can infer that the revenue of the wardrobe was the greatest on that particular day, and I would say this statement is sufficient. Okay, I'll again pause here, look at the questions that you have on the screen. If you have any doubt, please feel free to ask. So Arya is saying, sir, but we are assuming here, so just to check which will generate more revenue. No, Arya, see, this is a data sufficiency question where just randomly taking variable may later on result in different answers also. Okay, so I'm not going to take that risk. And this is like a standard practice that we do. Like in this case, it's not a problem. Frankly speaking, for statement 1, even if I take 653, you would still end up getting the answer because of the xy part. So you might be lucky out here. But there could be other questions where just taking 653 and 12, 10, 6 might end up giving you two different answers for some particular question. That is why we will not be taking y every time. Okay, so and it is always better to place the variable and then solve the question instead of taking one and solving it. Is this clear? Any other questions, anyone, before I move on to the next part? Okay, I don't see any questions, so let me move to the second statement. Chair, table, wardrobe. Let me again draw this quickly. Number of units were 2x, x, and 5x, 2x, x, and 5x. Okay, and we are looking at the price per unit. We still don't know. This is the units revenue. Now here I'm being told that the price of one table is $10 less than the price of one chair. So I can write it like this. The price of one table is $10 less than the price of one chair. And the price of one wardrobe is $20 less than the price of one table. Okay, so I can even set up my equation like this. Okay, now think about it. I need the price per unit. I don't have it. What I have is a relation, a C expressed in terms of T, W expressed in terms of T. So what you can infer is that, okay, if I assume my price per unit for the table as say T, okay, then I can say the price for a chair is T plus 10, and the price of a wardrobe is T minus 20. Any doubts here? Any questions? If you have, please feel free to ask. Now, again, I'm going to multiply it. So I'll get 2xt. Yes. Yes, Arindam. 2xt plus, but I would still agree, Arindam, I should have mentioned the selling price to avoid ambiguity. I agree with you. We could add selling price here because the moment you see selling price here and you see price here, you might get confused. So just to be on the safe side, the selling price word should have been given. That would have been better. So if I multiply these two, I'll get 2xt plus 20x. If I multiply this, I'll get xt. And if I multiply this, I'll get 5xt minus 100x. Any doubts till this point? And can anyone tell me, can I answer my question? Can I tell whose revenue is the greatest looking at this? Anyone? Okay, Vartika says chair. Okay. What about the others? Chair. Okay, how are you sure that no, there's no common comparing parameter like in the last case, Karish? Okay, good. So some people are now saying the correct answer. Exactly, that's correct. Exactly, we cannot, because we don't see the first and the most easiest way to come up with the inference, at least in this case, is that we don't have a common comparing factor like we had in the previous case. We had xy every time, so it was easy to compare the coefficients. Here the problem is we don't have the same common thing. Here's a plus, here's a minus. Now how can you be sure that after subtracting 100x, this value would be lesser than this? How can we sure? How can we be sure? There's a possibility, right, that even after subtracting, this is greater than this, or it could be the other way around also. There is a chance that this could be less than this, but I cannot be sure now that after subtracting 100x from 5xt, the value, this value that I get here would definitely be less. I cannot be sure. And you can even try and solve it to see what this gives you. It will give you the condition under which this is going to happen. So this basically tells you that when t is less than 40, then only this condition would be true. What condition? That the revenue of chair is greater than the revenue of the wardrobe. Okay, but can you tell me, do we know whether t is less than 40 or not? Do we know this? Do we know whether t is less than 40? Anywhere in the question have we told that this value of t is less than 40 or greater than 40? Is this information given to us? Let me know, guys. I'm setting up another poll. You can answer this poll. Do we know? No, we don't know, right? Arindam, you can do it in terms of C also. You can do it in terms of C, you can do it in terms of T, doesn't matter. As long as there's one common denominator in which you're comparing, that's still fine. Okay, both of these are fine, Arindam. Doesn't matter. So that's the point that I'm trying to make, guys, that since we don't know that t is less than 40, we would say this is not sufficient. This is not sufficient because we cannot be sure whether the revenue of the chair would be greater than the revenue of wardrobe. To be sure, we need some more information to get the answer. Since we don't have this information, that is why this statement is not sufficient. Okay, so as I told you, the learning that I was talking about, that sometimes people think that ratios might not be enough to get the answer. But if you notice, they are definitely enough to get the answer as long as we have a common denominator in which you're talking about. So when you're solving this question, make sure that you know how to convert the ratios into, these kind of numbers, and then multiplying it and checking out exactly whether this is possible or not. Don't just look and infer, okay, fractions are given, ratios are given. I've seen people do it. They see, okay, I don't have any absolute value, so not sufficient. Okay, that's a wrong approach. The other approach is that when you look at just the cost, you look at this, you see a plus sign, you see a minus sign, you end up saying, hey, there's a plus sign, so this must be greater, which is again how do I put it? It should be it's a wrong approach. Yeah, in them, I never said the prices should be negative. I'm not saying that. The prices have to be positive. Okay. Any other doubts, anyone? Any other questions? Those of you who are marking C, by the way, the C trap in this question could be that if you think, okay, I have a ratio here, I have an absolute value here, let me combine both of them to find out the exact value of chairs, tables, and wardrobes. If you fall under this category, then you have made a mistake of, not solving them individually properly. So don't fall for this trap. The major learning is that you don't always need absolute values. You don't always need absolute values to give your answer. When I say absolute, I mean the exact value, like 10, 12, $15. You don't need that. Sometimes just having the references is enough. Okay. Okay, guys, with this, let's go to the third question. This is the third one. This is slightly on the easier side, and I'm going to give you about 2 minutes for this one to solve this one. Sahil, we found T is less than 40 by taking the condition that in which situation, let me write it properly, in which situation is the revenue of wardrobe less than the revenue of chair. That is the case that I'm taking out here. Okay, so I'm taking this revenue, I'm setting up less and then checking in which situation it would be. And that gives me the case that when T is less than 40, the revenue of wardrobe would be less than revenue of the chair. And since this is not sufficient and this is sufficient, the correct answer, Anubhav, would be A. Okay. Arindam, I'm still not sure what the issue is. Let me check what you're trying to say once. Because why would you just take C is equal to 50? That's my question. Why can't you take something else? Why does it have to be 50? Why can't it be 40? Why can't it be, 31.2 or 31.5? Why do you want to take 50 only? It can take any value. Yeah, Arindam, that's absolutely correct. But how can you be sure that whenever you take any value more than 30, I agree with your point that it has to be more than 30, no doubt about it. If you don't take more than 30, then that's going to be a problem. But what I'm saying is that what value should you put? How are you sure that for any value of C greater than 30, the revenue of the chair will always be greater than the revenue of the wardrobe? That's my question. That is something you need to check. What I mean to say is that there could be some values of C for which the revenue of chair would be greater than the wardrobe, and there could be some values of C for which the revenue of the wardrobe would be greater than chair. That is what you need to figure out. So we are on the same page. I agree that C has to be greater than 30. The only thing that I think there's some gap is where you need to understand that there could be different values of C where the revenue, whose revenue would be the greatest, might change. Okay, guys, I can see answers have started pouring in. I'll give you another 30 seconds for this one. And then can you tell me what is your revenue equation? Just write the revenue equation for all three and can you send that to me? I'll reply it on chat. What's the issue? So when you wrote the cost in terms of C, after that, you tell me what is the revenue equation that you got. The revenue equation of wardrobe is more, but the price is C minus 30, which is lesser than that of the chair. Okay, the price of the chair is more, but the number of unit is less. That's the problem. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So basically, the number of chairs was 2x if I remember correctly. This is one equation, and the other equation would be this. I don't know if you got the same thing. And then let me finish the discussion for this question, and then I'll come back to yours. Okay, but I think this is what you must have got. Okay, guys, I'm ending the poll. So from what I can see is that some of you fell for the trap. The answer is indeed one among B and C. Can anyone tell you what's a trap in this question? Anyone, what's a trap in this question? Come on, guys, please participate. What do you think is the trap in this question? Okay, Divya says statement 2 has a trap in the final equation. Integers can have both. Okay, Damanpreet says both value. Correct. Okay, good. Okay, good. Yes. So integers, so in this question, we have to be careful about the fact that if we read the question, in this, we are just told that each entry is an integer. Okay. Now they are not telling me what kind of integer. So this integer could be a positive integer. It could be a negative integer. It could even turn out to be a zero also. Okay. So whenever you see the word integer, that's the kind of trap that I'm talking about, where you assume sometimes. And this happens subconsciously. Even I have made these kind of mistakes where, you know, I just read an integer in a very hurry. I might forget. I might intuitively just solve taking positive integers, which would be incorrect. Okay. So whenever you read the word integer, think about both, think about all positive, negative, zero, everything is possible. Okay. Now, this is a multiplication table, which clearly means that this is how you multiply in a multiplication table. So you do V is basically P times P, P square. W is basically 2 times P, which is 2P. Okay. And P times Q is this. This is P into Q. This, the multiplication for this would be like this, 2 multiplied by P. So this would be 2P. This is already 4. I don't need to do anything. This is 2Q. This is P into Q. This is 2Q. This is Q square. Okay, anyone has any doubts with this multiplication table? Because I've seen people, you know, not being able to sometimes understand how to work with multiplication table. Is this clear? How are we getting each and every value in the boxes? Okay, good. Okay, so all of you are saying yes, which is good. So I'm looking for the value of Q. Now, Q is present at a lot of places. If you notice, we have an equation which is X is equal to P into Q. We have an equation Y is equal to 2Q. And we also have an equation which is Z is equal to Q square. So what we can do is we can write it at the side of in a piece of paper, and then we will say, okay, no other information. So let's go to the first statement. Now, statement 1 is simple. W is greater than 1. Now, W is what? 2P. So I can say 2P is greater than 1, or P is greater than 0.5. Okay. But what do I do with this information? I'm looking for the value of Q. And this statement is telling me about P. So I would end up saying that this statement is not sufficient because I don't know anything about Q. So if A is not, statement 1 is not sufficient, your answer cannot be A or P. Okay, let's move to the second one. W is equal to YP. Now once again, W is 2P. I already know, so I'll substitute it here. I'll bring Y to the other side. I'll take the P common. And from here, I can say the product of two numbers is P times 2 minus Y is 0. So either P is equal to 0 or Y is equal to 2. Okay. Now, this is where some of you may falter and end up marking the answer as B. You would think, okay, Y is equal to 2 I'm getting from here, and I know Y is equal to 2Q. So I can find out the value of Q as 1. You might end up doing this. There's a good chance. Those of you who did this, you made a minor mistake. Let me tell you what that mistake is. Now, can anyone tell me, if I have something like this, A times B is equal to 0, what inference can I draw from this? When I say A times B is equal to 0, what is the meaning of this? A times B equal to 0. Either A or B is equal to 0. A or B equal to 0. Either A or B. Okay. Anyone else? Can anyone elaborate a bit more? A0, B0, Aradhana, yeah, you're correct. That's what I was looking for. So see, whenever you see that the product of two numbers is 0, there are three types of inferences that you can draw. The first inference is either A is equal to 0 and B is not equal to 0. Like for example, 0 times 3. That would still end up giving 0, right? The second inference could be that A is not 0, but B is 0. Okay. So that means a case like this, 3 times 0. The third inference is both of them are equally, both of them are 0. Okay, so there are three possibles, which are scenarios which are possible. Okay, and you cannot be 100% sure which one is definitely true. All you can say is that at least one of them is 0, but you cannot say both of them are definitely 0. This is something that you cannot say. Keep this in mind. Why am I emphasizing on this is because when you are taking y equal to 2 and substituting it here, you are just taking case 3. You're forgetting about 1 and 2. What I mean by that is, if this seems confusing, let me write down the three cases here. See, both of them are the product of these two is 0, right? So either P0 or Q0 or y is equal to 2. So your case would be like this. Either P is equal to 0 or y is not equal to 2. Either P is not equal to 0, y equal to 2, or both of them are true at the same time. Okay, this is important because there could be a scenario when P is 0 and say y is say 10. Just giving a random example. The product would still be 0, right? So from after you solve this, you should be able to infer that I cannot say for sure whether y is a definitely 2 or not. It could be 2, but there's a chance that it might not be 2 if p is equal to 0. Is this part clear? Try to explain it as elaborately as possible. If you have doubts, please ask. If it is clear, please mark yes in the poll. So the end inference is that I cannot be sure whether y is definitely 2 or not. It could be, it could not be, depending on what p is. Okay. Okay, I can see it's clear to everyone, which is good. So since I cannot say y is equal to 2, even this statement is not sufficient. If this is not sufficient, statement option B also is out. Now, when I combine, the good thing is, notice that I know that P is greater than 0, greater than 0.5, my bad. P is greater than 0.5, statement 1 tells me. And I have three cases with me. Now, out of these three cases, only this case is valid once I combine both these statements. If P is greater than 0.5, this case gets discarded. What is what case is left? This case is left which says P is not equal to 0 and y is equal to 2. So if I can be 100% sure that y is definitely 2, and if y is 2, then q has to be 1. So the correct answer in this case is going to be option C. Please let me know if this is 100% clear. If you have any doubts, feel free to ask. Learning from this question is two. Number one is regarding integers, keeping in mind that an integer could mean anything, positive, negative, 0. If you have this in mind, it may help you solve the question quickly in the exam. And like in this case, second thing is knowing this part. When the product of two numbers is 0, then that does not mean that, there's just only one case. There are three possible scenarios. You need to take care of all three. Okay. Okay, guys, let's go to the next question. Then I don't see any doubts in this one, which is pretty good. So there's an interesting question I want to talk about. But before that, very quickly, I wanted to just make a small announcement. I'll take 2 minutes to do that. Is that so if you're liking this webinar and if you're interested in, in attending webinars like this or taking a crash course on this where you can attend webinars with like a paid student, then the crash course is an idle course for you that you can definitely try. So the sessions that we are now doing are sessions which cover a lot of things in one shot, right? So I'm covering percentages questions, questions based on ratios, all of them in one shot. But if you want to do a more structured prep, especially if you are targeting round one, where you attend live webinars in a very small batch of 10 to 15 or 20 students at the max, and where we cover each and every topic methodically in a sequential manner. Okay, so we do a class only on, say, percentages and ratio. We do a class only on, say, LCM, GCD, and primes. So if you're interested in doing this paid course or crash course, I would recommend that you should enroll for this, or at least talk to us about it if you want to know how we can help you with this. I am sharing a Calendly link with you. So if you want to, just figure out how this could be helpful for you, feel free to book a session with us, and we'll let you know how this crash course could be beneficial. But my recommendation would be that if you're preparing, if you're planning to take GMAT in round one, especially, and if you want to improve quickly, and understand, solve these kind of questions that we are doing and learning what kind of different kind of mistakes that are possible, then you should definitely try going for the crash course. Okay, we already have 2 batches running. This is the 3rd one that we'll be opening on the 5th of June. But in any case, if you're not sure, if you just want to discuss it, I've shared the Calendly link with you. You can book a free session with us and we can discuss it. Okay, with this, let's go to the next question, guys. Here's the next one, and let me bring up the poll. Okay, I have few responses, so I'll wait for another 30 seconds. Once again, this may seem like a lengthy question, but in fact, it is not. The key here in this question is also pre-analysis. Yes, that's a typo. This would be T1. This is T2, T1. Okay, guys, I'm going to start the discussion now. Let me end the poll. Most of you, in fact, this is a good thing, have got this question correct. 63% of you marked the answer as B, which is the correct answer in this case. So I'm pretty happy about it. Let me very quickly discuss this question. The trick in this question is to understand that whenever you're finding percentages and whenever you're comparing two things, as usual, again, you may not need the absolute value to solve the question. Okay, sometimes values like radiuses and heights might get cancelled out, and you may just need the percentages to get the answer. So very quickly, let's look at what is given in the question. We have a cylinder with a radius of r and height of h. Okay, and there's another cylinder T2. So let's write it down. T1 has r and h. T2, in case of T2, the radius is a% greater than T1. Now, when I say a%, what I mean is it's r already there, but it is a% more. So r plus a% of r is how we write it. Or in most of the cases, what I prefer to do it is write it in one shot. So if somebody tells something is 10% more, simply 1 plus 10 by 100. A% more, 1 plus a by 100. Okay. And the height is b% more. So I'll write it directly. Height times 1 plus b upon 100. Okay. Then I'm asked the curved surface area of T2. Curved surface area of T2 is what % more than that of T1. So what they're trying to ask is, let's write curved surface area as C2, okay? The curved surface of area of C2 is what % more. So to find percentage more or less, what we do is we subtract we find the difference of the curved surface area, and I'm trying to find out what % more than the curved surface area of T1. So I'm finding it with respect to T1. So I'll divide it by the curved surface area of T1 and multiply by 100. This is what I am looking for. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're doing a question on curved surface area and cylinder, you should know that the formula for the curved surface area is 2 pi small r into h, 2 pi RH. That's the formula. Okay. So to find out the curved surface area of C1, we don't have to do much. We simply have to write 2 pi RH. Done. Okay. As far as C2 is concerned, 2 pi. Now this is my R and this is my H. If I multiply these two, can I write it like this? Please let me know if this part is clear or not, because then after that, everything else is pretty easy. So I'm simply multiplying this. This is my new R. Oops, my bad. This is my new R. This is my new H. I'm multiplying these two. So I'll have 2 pi RH multiplied by 1 plus A by 100 multiplied by 1 plus B by 100. Good. So I can see it's clear to everyone. Good. Let me end the poll. Okay. Now there's one small, I would say, thing that you call it a trick, whatever you want to call it, is that whenever I have things like this, okay, with huge terms, I prefer to write the percentage change like this. So that if there's anything that I can cancel, let me first of all cancel it out. Keep in mind, both of these mean the same thing. Okay, I've just simplified it a bit. But the way, if I do it like this, what happens is if there's anything that I can cancel in C2 and C1, I'll do it in one shot and then do my calculation. So my C2 is 2 pi RH 1 plus A upon 100, 1 plus B upon 100 divided by C1, which is 2 pi RH minus 1 times 100. And notice an interesting thing, that this 2 pi RH, 2 pi RH gets cancelled out. You're left with just this. And now you don't need to solve. You can pause here. You can pause here and say, okay, there are two variables. These are the two variables which I need to find out. The value of R, the value of H in this case is irrelevant. I don't need it. Okay, that is the pre-analysis part that I wanted to show you and how this is important. Those of you who do not do the pre-analysis, if you jump directly into the statement, you would end up marking the answer as option C. Good chance that you will mark C or E, saying that once again that these are percentages, not absolute values. A lot of you mark E. And some of you might think I need information about R, H, A, B, all of it. So you might end up marking the answer as. If you fall in this category, you did not do your pre-analysis, guys. You need to get better at it. Now, if I look at this statement, obviously R and H I don't need. So this is not sufficient. I need A and B, and they're giving me the value of A and B. So this is A, this is B. I have it with me. I can plug it in and I can get my answer. So the correct answer is option B. Is this clear, everyone? Let me bring up the poll. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. This was an easy one, so I just breezed through it a bit quickly. There is one more interesting question which I want to talk about, which is based on translation. Okay, I can see it's clear to everyone. So let's go to, yeah, this is a very interesting translation question. And let me bring up the poll. That's okay, Pichaya. At least you got the correct answer. Chandan, most probably this might be the last question for the day. Depends on how this goes. But I would show you the remaining questions so that you can try them at home. So there are two more questions. I'll show them on the screen. You can definitely give it a shot later on. Okay, 10 seconds more, then I'm going to end the poll. Those of you who haven't responded, please do so quickly. And those who have done it, can you let me know what's your take on this question? What do you think? How difficult is this question? Okay, that's okay, Chandan. Don't worry. We are going to discuss how to approach it. That's not a problem. Okay, I'm ending the poll. I have about 35% of you think that the answer should be C. Okay, 28% of you think knowing just the mark price would be enough, and some of you think that B is definitely. So again, the answer choices are scattered in this case, which clearly shows that there's some confusion. So as I was asking you, what do you think of this question? Is this tough, lengthy, but not so difficult? Okay, Himanshu, I think this is not even lengthy in my opinion. I think we should be able to do it in very quickly. I think 3 to 4 lines, maybe. Let's see. I have to visualize them in terms of margin. Okay. The reason I gave this question is because of in word problems, and what I've noticed is that students rarely set up equations properly, or they're kind of scared to take variables. And what is surprising, and especially in cases like a question like mark price and selling price and cost price, because there we already have well-defined formulas and rules. Like we know profit is selling price minus cost price, discount is mark price minus selling price. So these formulas are already there. So ideally people know these formula, but they don't apply it. They don't apply it because they don't see any variables or numbers in it. So my advice, whenever it comes to a word problem question, be it a profit loss question or engineering word problem question, if the variables are not given, if numbers are not given, then whatever entities that you're dealing with, make sure that you represent them with some kind of a variable. Otherwise, you will not know how to solve the question. Okay. So for example, if I read this, I see it's given that a certain electronic stores offers a deal to its customers. So this is a information which I cannot do anything about, right? Now, the moment I read customer who buy 3 watches of model X, so somebody is buying 3 watches, good, each having the same cost price. So I'll assume my cost price to be CP. I'll simply write cost price of watches CP. Okay. Customer who buys 3 watches of model X, each having the same cost price, pay the marked price for the first 2 watches and a discounted price for a third one. So for first 2 watches, he's paying the marked price. So he's paying marked 2 times marked price because there are 2 watches. So what I'm doing is I'm assuming a marked price to be MP, as simple as that, because I have to set up my equation. Third watch, he's paying a discounted price. So whatever was the marked price minus some discount is the price that he's paying for the third watch. So I'll write this down. Cost price is same for all watch. Okay. First 2 watches, I'm paying the marked price. So marked price plus marked price is 2 marked price. Third watch, I'm paying a discounted, so MP minus D. And see, I'm not afraid of taking variables. I'm taking it. I'm hoping that somewhere along the down the line, I would be able to make some sense out of it, or something would get cancelled out. Okay. Now, the third line says the store makes half the profit. So the store is making half the profit from the sale of 3 watches under this deal. Okay. So this profit that he's making under this deal. So let's write down the profit here. Profit is what? Selling price minus cost price. What is the total selling price? This is the price that is the selling price. 2 MP plus MP minus D for the 3 watches. Okay. And the cost price, I'm selling 3 watches. All 3 watches have the same cost price. So I'll write it as 3 CP. So my profit turns out to be 3 MP minus 3 CP minus D. This is my profit. Now, the question says the store makes half the profit from this than it makes from the sale of 2 watches at marked price. So this is how I break it down. What's my profit from the sale of 3 watches? MP minus 3 CP minus D. This is half the profit with respect to the 2 watches sold at marked price. So what is the profit that I would make when I sell 2 watches at the marked price? It would be 2 MP minus 2 CP. Is this partly because this statement is slightly tricky, so I want you to focus very carefully. Half the profits, I'm comparing the profit from the sales of 3 watches, and this is being compared, this profit is being compared with respect to the sale of 2 watches at the marked price. So the profit of these two are compared, and I'm told that this profit is half of this profit. I'm bringing up the yes and no poll. Please let me know if this is clear or not. Okay. Okay, I can see it's clear. I need to find out the discount. I'm looking for D. So I'll simplify this. I'll write 3 MP minus 3 CP minus D is equal to half And I'm doing all the steps. By the way, we can simplify it directly. So D is equal to 2 times MP minus CP. This is what I got from my question stem. I'm looking for D, and to find D, I need MP minus CP. How can I get it? I can get the answer. I can find the discount if I have the actual value of MP and CP. If I know the actual value of MP and CP, like $100, $20, I can find out the discount. Or if I can find out MP minus CP directly. This is the way you should infer. Okay. And what is MP minus CP? This is the profit, right? Profit on mark price. If I sell something at mark price, this would be my profit. So if I can get this value directly, then also I can find my discount. With this understanding only, you should go to the statement. Now, the first statement tells you that the marked price is $30. So you know this is $30. But you don't know the value of CP. Since you don't know the value of CP, you cannot find out the discount using the first statement. So about 20%, I think, marked the answer as A, which is incorrect. Even D is incorrect. Okay. Let's look at the second statement. Second statement is saying that the profit on selling each watch, so the profit that I make on selling each watch at marked price is $10. Profit at marked price is MP minus CP. This is $10. Notice now I'm getting the direct value of MP minus CP. So I can plug it here and I can get my answer directly from statement 2. So the correct answer in this case is going to be option B. Now, I hope the 5 questions that we have discussed from this, the one at least takeaway that you should definitely be taking away is that you don't always need the exact value of each and entity in the question to get the answer. This is like a very common trait in a lot of data sufficiency question, a common trap where people always think I need MP, CP, or X, Y, all value to get the answer. That's not true. Please let me know if this is clear. Let me reset the poll. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm ending the session at this point of time. I'm showing you the 2 questions. If you want to try them at home, please feel free to do so. This is the first question, and this is the second one. Both of them are relatively, they're categorized as 650 level questions. If you go through the inequalities topic and time and distance topic, you should be able to do these 2 questions quite easily. Okay. I'm opening the session now. If you have any questions, guys, feel free to ask related to GMAT prep or quant prep. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Once again, I'll remind you that if you want to talk to us, not now, but maybe say after the session, if you feel that you want to know, more about GMAT Viz or how we can help you, or if you have a special case and you want to talk separately about it, I'm just sharing the Calendly link once again. Please feel free to book a session with us and we would be more than happy to help you out. So I've shared the Calendly link again. Now, Pichai, we generally don't share the PDF. We will be uploading this webinar on YouTube. So if you want, I can share the YouTube link. And once we upload it, you'll get the notification. Just one sec. Let me just share the YouTube link, guys. Okay, so I've shared the Calendly link. I've shared the YouTube link. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. I hope you like this session. This is question number 7, guys. Unfortunately, Rachel, I don't have the answer with me. But if I remember correctly, it should either be A or B. Just letting you know now very quickly. Or question number 7. Question number 6, I don't have the answer with me at this point of time. You can write to us on support and I will share the answer. That's not a problem. Okay. So 7th and 6th. Yeah, Picha, I've shared the YouTube link. Please feel free to use it. Glad to hear that, Tausif. Thanks, Himanshu. Okay, guys, no question. Everything going well in your life in terms of quant and GMAT? Okay, I'll wait for another 2 minutes. If there are no more questions, then I would end the session. You can even write to us on support if, let's say, if you missed using the calendar link later on, if you want to get in touch with us regarding this session or in general also, you can use the support link to talk to us. Okay. I don't see any more questions on the chat box, so I am going to end the session. Okay. All the best, guys. And Arindam, just do one thing. Just send me your analysis at this email ID. I'll reply back to it. Okay. I'll let you know where are you going wrong. Let me share my email ID. Yes, I've shared my email ID, Arindam. Just write to me your solution, whatever you have done, and I'll reply back and let you know what's the issue, where you might be going wrong, or if there's anything else that can be done. Okay. Thanks, Radna. Thanks, Rachel. I'm glad that you all liked it. Himanshu, I told you, right, in the starting of the session, only time management, timing is a side effect. Frankly speaking, it's timing is an issue because you are not taking care of either one of the two things that I talked about, either the concept or the process. Okay, as long as you are, I'm not sure what you mean by please share the question as well. What do you mean by which question? Are you talking about the chair wardrobe question? Okay, Himanshu was saying that if you fix your first two things, then you would not face problem timing issues a lot. Yes, I do agree that at some point you will have to strategize a bit. I'm not denying it. There could be cases where you might not be able to solve all 31 questions in the exam. But as long as, if you're able to solve, say, for example, 28, 29 easily, and in between, if you're able to skip the questions, with the ones which you really don't know, then that's also okay. If you're targeting Q50, then that's a totally different thing. In that case, I do agree that you may need to be slightly better with time management also. So you may have to take mocks, a lot of quant mocks, a lot of time test to get used to the pressure, I would say, that sometimes people feel when they are doing it under a timing constraint. But overall, I'm telling you, timing is generally not an issue if the first two things are fixed. You're welcome, Anish. You're welcome, Divya. So guys, very quickly summarizing it so that it sticks, that please keep in mind, fix the first two, make sure, when I say first two, number one is having a very solid conceptual clarity, a really good conceptual clarity. And second is knowing the right way to solving questions. The right way of solving questions is very important. Learn the methodology of applying setting up equations, breaking down sentences, writing down the right inferences. As long as you're able to do these two things properly, you should be able to solve most of the questions in GMAT very easily. Okay. Okay, guys, then I'm ending the poll. Once again, a quick reminder, if you're interested in joining the crash course, feel free to talk to us and we'll let you know how this can be helpful in your GMAT prep. Okay. Okay, guys, take care then and have a great day. Bye.